what can you say, in your opinion, is the legacy?
It's hard to say what Terence's legacy was. I think in some ways, I think, having dumped all this criticism on the time wave, I now turn around and say, in some sense, he was right I think that his notion that we are accelerating towards some kind of historical singularity, was probably right on. You don't need the time wave to tell you that things are getting stranger and stranger and seem to be going faster and faster. And just the rate of change that is affecting our, it seems apparent that things are, headed somewhere, towards some sort of critical event. But whether that's going to be, I do not believe it's going to be a single event, on 2012, December 21st, 2012. I do not believe that novelty really ingresses into the continuum that way, but I do believe, and I think if you look back at the last decades, I do think novelty is a real thing, and it does ingress into reality. And I think maybe Terence's chief legacy was to sort of make people aware of that, and even know that, yes, things are changing, things are stranger, not only than you think they are, they're stranger than you can possibly imagine. And,
right.
He's not the only one.
To quote John Haldane, I think, wasn't that John Haldane that said that originally?
JBS, right, exactly. That was what he said. Terence, he was a complex guy, and he was, I think his legacy is that he led people to think about things that they would never otherwise think about. It never would have occurred to them, all these crazy, wacky notions. And he was such he was a bard in some ways. He was so articulate, and people enjoyed listening to him, and he could say the craziest things in such a way that it seemed to make sense, and people were accepting of it, and without too much critical thought. In fact, he used to hate for me to come to his seminars, because I would challenge him, and, I would say, well, what you said didn't make any sense, and it contradicts what you said 20 minutes ago. And that didn't make any sense either. So, where's the sense in this? But he didn't, but it was okay because he said it so well, and I really think that was it. He could have said just about anything. And, having grown up with him, I know that, one of the things that he always liked doing is making provocative statements. And in some ways, he was kind of like, he enjoyed shocking people with these radical statements. But in a way, it was like a wake-up call for many people. It's like, oh yeah, I never really thought about that before. So I really think that was his, that was his legacy in some ways, that he created a context where people really wondered, about who are we? What is our place in the universe? We're surrounded by mystery. We don't really know very much. And yet, here we are in our existential situation. We're living organisms on a planet that, we appear to have intelligence. We appear to, be part of this system. And how common is that? How, is that something that's totally unique, or is that something that's just kind of ho-hum run of the mill? We don't really know. So I think that was in some ways his real legacy was to just make people think. I remember when he was just beginning to sort of talk publicly, and wasn't really well known, but he would go to a few seminars and occasionally he'd be on the radio and so on. And one of his fans said, I just love hearing you talk because at the time I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, do you remember Sing Along with Mitch?
I don't think
Hello?
I do. Yeah, I don't think I remember that. Do you hear
Well,
me?
he was a guy on television. He was, and he had like a folk song type show, and he had a guitar, and he'd come on, and everybody would sing along with Mitch. And one of Terence's fans said, you're just like Sing Along with Mitch, except it's Think Along with Terence. I thought that got it pretty well.
Yeah.
He made people think. He stretched people's imagination, and I think that's his real legacy, and that's always a good thing, just to exercise your imagination. Because of this thing, as we were just discussing, the world is almost certainly stranger than you could possibly